Well, happy Friday afternoon. Once again, this is the last session of the first week of the 11th annual Transforming the Teaching and Learning Environment virtual conference, which is presented by Northeastern State University. Session today is one of 60-hour-long sessions we have through Friday the 14th. I'm Bob Ailes. I'm your moderator. We have Michelle doing the closed captions for our session. To view the captions, simply click on the closed caption icon on the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. Today's session is grading made easy with technology. Or no, that's beyond I do, we do, you do, right? Oh, yep. Man.
No problem.
It's been a long week. Paul Sylvester is an assistant professor at Westchester University of Pennsylvania in the early and middle grades education program. He had an interesting career, Paul. He grew up in a suburb of Detroit during the deindustrialization that led him to a career in urban schools as a teacher, dean of faculty at an urban, environmentally focused charter school, founder of an internet startup. Too bad it wasn't like Facebook or something, right? And now he's a professor supervising student teachers in the school district of Philadelphia. And two of his big interests are project-based learning and critical pedagogy. Paul, let me turn it over to you.
Great, thanks everybody, or thanks Bob, and thank the rest of you for coming out. So I'm hoping that this session will be relevant to folks from all levels of education. Background here is that I came to Westchester in teacher education, and everywhere I was looking, I was seeing this same format for lesson planning. My student teachers were using it, their cooperating teachers were using it, and it's the format that people refer to as I do, we do, you do, which is also known as the gradual release of responsibility. And so in slide, let's see, next slide. So the I do, we do, you do refers to this. It starts off with the teacher modeling the skill, the I do part. The we do part is the teacher performing the skill with the student, and the you do part is the students performing the skill on their own or in a group. So you're gradually releasing responsibility. So I found that this was really prevalent. I did a survey of our student teachers. About 80 responded and said that their cooperating teacher was using gradual release either multiple times a day or a few times a day. And one cooperating teacher explained to me, this is how we do it, that it comes from the principal. So the issue here that I saw is that gradual release is well suited for teaching discrete skills, but it's less suited for fostering critical reflection, creativity, innovation, non-routine problem skills, problem-solving skills. Okay, and so here you can think of Lave and Wenger's ideas of community and practice, that student teaching is supposed to be an internship. You're supposed to be learning through what they call legitimate peripheral participation, being at the elbow of a more experienced veteran. And so it becomes an issue if what you're seeing is limited. So let me just click on here. So to start to address this problem, I created an inquiry group. This was an action research group consisting of student teachers who were interested in trying to plan lessons that were not in the I do, we do, you do format. And I purposefully framed it in the negative of this is what we're not doing. But because frankly, I didn't know what it was going to look like for students to plan lessons in different modes. So let's see. So there are 3 cohorts, a total of 23 students. Everybody was in neighborhood public schools. The research questions that I brought to this were about what are the emergent structures of lessons when student teachers plan and implement lessons that are alternatives to the gradual release of responsibility. I wanted to know what the obstacles were to students planning and implementing dialogic lessons by student teachers. And dialogic is a term that I brought to this after having done this work and sort of seen a pattern for how students were planning lessons. And I'll define these terms later. And then lastly, what are the opportunities for student teachers to plan and implement dialogic lessons? So I want to give you an example of a problem that is not a gradual release of responsibility problem. And this comes from a first grade teacher who was doing what she called to her kids a grapple problem. And she called it a grapple problem because rather than demonstrating first, she would give the problem to the students, explaining to them that they were expected to grapple with it. They would have 5 or 10 minutes to work on it. They should try and figure it out any way they can. And then they would come together. She would bring them together and highlight a few of the ways that the students were coming at this problem and sort of helping them see multiple approaches. So this problem says, and Mackenzie has 5 cookies and asks, what are all the ways she can share the cookies with Keon? So this first example, you can see that the student did it numerically. They label, what Keon's getting, what Mackenzie's getting, and they proceed pretty systematically, like 1 and 4, 2 and 3, 3 and 2, and so on. Whoops. Okay, the second student draws pictures and circles them. Devin labels Mackenzie and Keon's cookies that way. The third kid's like, what the hell's the matter with you people? This is how you share cookies. I'm drawing a picture of how you share cookies. So 3 very different approaches to the problem. So as opposed to gradual release of responsibility, they're doing the work first and then coming together and discussing it. So in the inquiry group, when we looked at this early on, and it came to sort of be a touchstone piece for us. So in the inquiry group, students would present a problem. They would present something that they were going to plan the lesson about. The rest of the group would ask clarifying questions about the context, about whether students were used to gradual release or whether they used other formats and so on. And then we would brainstorm with that student our ideas for what that lesson might look like. And in our brainstorming, we always came back to this question. So where's the grapple? Where's that part of this where the students have an opportunity to struggle? Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the literature about gradual release. So there's really very little empirical work about the gradual release of responsibility, and even less about the terms I do, we do, you do. Most of what there is about how to implement it and why you should implement it, and almost nothing about its efficacy. So some authors have suggested that gradual release of responsibility is in effect a form of scaffolding. So you're probably familiar with this term. It comes from Vygotsky's sociocultural theory of learning. And it's a metaphor for construction, for the scaffolding we see around buildings. The metaphor is for a temporary support by the teacher to enable the student to reach a higher goal. But others have held that the description of gradual release of responsibility as scaffolding is actually a misapplication of the term. And this view says that the teacher-initiated directive strategy of gradual release of responsibility diverges from the historical meaning of scaffolding as a more organic interaction, an interaction based on reciprocity, where you're fine-tuning it moment by moment to the student's inner understandings. Okay, so in my literature search, I found that the best term for describing gradual release of responsibility is actually the term explicit instruction. And here there's a lot of good empirical support. So the term explicit instruction includes the key elements of gradual release of responsibility. So demonstration, guided practice, and independent work. But it also includes a number of other practices that are supported by empirical studies. So beginning the lesson with a short review, presenting material in a series of small steps, asking a large number of questions, checking the response of all the students, all that, so on. So Archer and Hughes explain that explicit instruction is designed for times when the discovery may be inaccurate, inadequate, incomplete, or inefficient. So for example, they say without explicit input, how could an individual discover the sound associated with a letter, quantity associated with a number, the steps in an efficient math algorithm, the order of operations, the process for sounding out words, the construction of a persuasive essay, the elements of a scientific inquiry, and so on. Okay. So explicit instruction is designed for efficient success. So in contrast, dialogic instruction, which is the term that I found most closely mapped over to the lessons that the student teachers were planning, is not at all geared for efficient success. It's really about students struggling through complex problems, co-constructing knowledge. That's the dialogic part. And so here, the term dialogic is used in a lot of different ways, but the way I'm using it here is its meaning that emphasizing students co-constructing knowledge with each other and the teacher. So in doing this, there are multiple ways to solve the problem, and making errors is part of learning. And here you can think about both the research on having a growth mindset where errors aren't to be avoided but to be learned from. And you can also think about the research on grit and students' persistence. So dialogic instruction have those much more closely. Okay, so I want to talk about a couple studies that I found that were of particular interest. Hebert and Stigler did this extensive study of classrooms comparing US math classrooms to math classrooms in a couple of, or a number of high-performing Asian countries. And one of the central findings there was that the US teachers, here I'm quoting, almost always stepped in and did the work for the students or ignored the conceptual aspect of the problem when discussing it. They also say that US students almost never got a chance, less than 1% of the time, to explore mathematical relationships while solving these problems. So in a word, what they found was that US teachers were tending to minimize grappling right? Okay, just one second. Okay, so a second study I want to highlight is Schwartz and Branford's work from 1998. And so they looked at 3 ways of ways of instruction. And in the first one, the teacher gives the data and tells the student its significance. The second way is the teacher gives tasks, gives data, and asks the students its significance. So there, that second one, you can see that mapping over with the grapple problem. The third way, the teacher gives the data, asks the students its significance, and then tells what others have seen as the significance. Okay, so ultimately, we don't want that the third child in the grapple problem sequence. We don't. It's funny and cute that they draw the picture of the one child handing the other child the cookie, but ultimately, that's not where we want that child to be. That ultimately, we want all the kids to be seen to understand multiple ways of solving the problem. And so it's this third way. The article that Schwartz and Branford wrote is called A Time to Tell. That there's still an appropriate time when you come together to say, this is what other mathematicians thought about solving that. This is what other scientists think about that, and so on. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about the methods for our action research group. It was collaborative action research. We were truly figuring this out together. The inquiry group met for 1 hour a week for 10 weeks per semester, and then I worked with 3 cohorts over 3 semesters. As I said, we did collaborative planning of 1 student's lesson per week. We did other activities, like I would present theoretical frameworks. We would video chat with classroom teachers who were doing interesting work. There were times when we looked at particular tech applications that we thought could be particularly generative, like an example was Google Earth. Okay, so out of that, I then took the transcription of the inquiry group sessions and the exit interviews that I did and transcribed those and then coded those. I was also observing the majority of the student teachers who were in the inquiry group. I think it was 17 of the student teachers. And so I had the opportunity to observe those lessons and debrief with those lessons. So that was a point of triangulation. Okay, so here are the research questions that I came with. These are some findings for the research question. So this first one about the emergent structures of lessons. So what emerged was a pattern where the teacher starts off by giving a challenge. So the challenge might be one or more of the following: solving a problem, answering a question, doing research, analyzing an experience, analyzing an artifact such as a photo or a video, or looking for rules that allow them to move from a concrete expression to an abstract one. So all kinds of different challenges, but the lessons that they were created started off with that challenge. Secondly, the students grappled with the challenge. So the students are generally told that they need to work on the problem individually or with peers without receiving assistance from the teacher. So here you can think of that grapple problem. So typically there are low stakes for completing the challenge. Often the challenge has one or more possible answers and or more than one way to solve the problem. Okay. Third, the students come together with the teacher to make sense of their work and make their thinking visible. The teacher highlights multiple ways to solve the challenge and and the emphasis is more on understanding the process than getting the correct answer. Okay, so in this process, what we came to be aware of was how much our students were used to receiving the challenge and then completing the challenge and or raising their hand, right? So in US classrooms, well, I shouldn't say US classrooms, in the classrooms that our student teachers were working in, it was a matter of seconds between when students were given a task and when they completed. It was a very rapid turnaround. So here you can see the x-axis here is time. So in comparison with grapple problems or dialogic problems, the student receives the challenge and the teacher is trying to stretch out that time of productive struggle. So they stretch out the time before the student completes the challenge, and then they also stretch out the time of reflection and discussion. Very different orientation. And here you can see that this goes back to that lit review where fundamentally there are different purposes to the explicit instruction and the dialogic instruction. Okay, research question number 2. What are the obstacles to planning and implementing dialogic lessons by student teachers? So here in the right-hand columns, you can see the number of occurrences and transcripts of the inquiry group, and then the number of occurrences and exit interviews. So really interestingly, look back. So the most cited obstacle to implementing grapple problems was their elementary students' pushback because of the task difficulty. So some students reported that their students were unfamiliar with the experience, and 6 of them noted that the students cried because they weren't used to doing this sort of work. And there's also one exception, and since then I've seen other exceptions where students got used to the format very quickly and showed a lot of excitement about doing the work. Okay, the second finding about the obstacles was that a lot of student teachers felt it was an obstacle because there was pressure to keep up. There was not enough time. And 6 students reported this being tied to standardized tests. So while this number might seem like small relative to some of the other categories, the frequency gains importance by the fact that only one student teacher was in a grade and a subject, which was 8th grade math, in which students take standardized tests. So meaning that the press for test preparation was shared across other non-tested grades and areas. Okay, third finding about the obstacles. Some folks reported that the textbook was framed in a way that did not allow grapple problems. There were also exceptions there where a student teacher or number of student teachers talked about the end of the chapter questions being well suited to use as grapple problems to begin the unit. Okay, then a couple subcategories: classroom management challenges or leadership challenges. Okay, research question number 3. What are the opportunities for student teachers to plan and implement dialogic lessons? Okay, so here overwhelmingly, student teachers found the most opportunities for implementing dialogic lessons in math, with this being commented on 23 times in the inquiry group transcript. Interestingly, when looking at the observations of lessons, there were actually a fair number of lessons that were in other areas. So in terms of what we talked about in inquiry group, it's really striking the difference between the number of folks who cited math and then pretty big drop into science and other areas of the textbook. But in actual implementation, 10 of the lessons I observed had to do with social studies and 9 with science. All right. So some implications for this. So first, the popular gradual release of responsibility is designed to efficiently ease students into success. But students need opportunities to also grapple with non-routine problems. And dialogic instruction provides opportunities for doing that. So the question should not be which is more effective than the other, because they have fundamentally different goals and their merit. Okay, so to overcome the obstacle of students' opposition to dialogic teaching, teachers and students should explicitly tell their charges that the problem or the challenge that they're about to take on may likely be different than what they're used to. That'll require them to struggle to figure out, that they will not be given help, and that while this struggle may feel uncomfortable, there will be no penalties for not getting it right. So given the prevalence of the gradual release model, we really need to give students a heads up that we're trying something new. They're going to experience some discomfort, and that's okay. It's to be expected. Lastly, while teachers and students may find mathematics as the most readily available opening for dialogic teaching, they should fight the culture common to many schools that ignores the potential for this work in other subject areas. Instead, they should reference students' success with productive struggle in math when asking students to grapple with problems in other subject areas. In math and in other subject areas, they should look for opportunities to adapt assignments from textbook series into graphic problems. Okay, talk about this a little bit. What questions or comments do you have?
I'll give them some time. They're slow typists.
No problem at all.
Are you working on any follow-up research related to this?
Am I doing follow-up research?
Are you doing any follow-up research related to this?
Yeah, I'm coming at this in a number of different ways. So one is that I'm doing survey research in which the students identify what schools they're in and talk a little bit about the pedagogy that they're seeing. So knowing their schools, we can then look up the demographics of those schools. And what we want to see is whether we find differences in relation to race, to social class, and they're the proxies, free and reduced lunches, English language learners, or grade level. And so there's that aspect. Another way that we're coming at this is to do analysis of textbooks to see whether textbooks are framing the lessons that they suggest in terms of the gradual release responsibility, or whether they're including dialogic teaching too. And so by asking the student teachers about what textbook series they're using. Then we can backpedal and look at those same demographic factors and see whether we see differences in the textbooks that are happening. And the background of this is that there's a lot of plenty of research going back decades that has found differences in the pedagogy of for rich kids and poor kids, and that the pedagogy for poor kids tends to look a lot more like the menial work that their parents are being asked to do. So it'll be interesting to see whether gradual release of responsibility is pervasive, across social classes, or whether we're seeing some the old differences between social class. One other area, I'm doing some case study research where I'm looking more closely at 3 or 4 of the student teachers. So I have a question for you folks. I guess I'm not sure of your backgrounds and what fields you're in, but I'm wondering if there are any of you who are teacher educators or people who are spending time in schools, and what you're seeing in regard to gradual release of responsibility, whether you're finding you're seeing a lot of that or not.
Well, we just gotta see. They may be burnt out from all the sessions. A lot of these folks have attended pretty much all the sessions this week.
Right. That's a lot.
Any questions, guys? I think I'm feeling closure at this time of day on a Friday.
No problem. It's been a pleasure talking. My email is up there. If anyone has follow-up questions or comments, I welcome them, okay? So thank you all for coming out on a Friday afternoon.
I'm glad we're able to get you in to do this, Bob. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Okay. Don't forget, folks, you got a whole nother week coming up starting on Monday. Rest up, and I'll see you back on Monday morning.
Take care.